Welcome to the deep dive. We've got some really interesting stuff to get into today. Lots of you have sent in questions and thoughts on habits, addiction, and mindfulness. So today we're taking a deep dive into all that. We'll be looking at Judson Brewer's The Craving Mind.
That's a great book.
It is. Plus we've got some other stuff to bring in, like that TED Talk by Helen Fisher.
Oh yeah, the Love and Brain expert.
Exactly. You know, for this deep dive, we're going to try to figure out just how habits hook us. Is it smoking? That endless scrolling on social media? What about even like falling in love?
Yeah, all kinds of things can become habits.
And the big question is, can mindfulness really help us break free? Let's start with that dopamine hit we all hear so much about.
Okay, so the core idea is this: reward-based learning. Basically, our brains are always looking for pleasure and trying to avoid pain, right? Like that's how we survive.
Makes sense. Touch a hot stove once, you learn pretty quick not to do that again.
Exactly. And on the other hand, think about chocolate.
Oh, here we go.
It tastes so good, your brain's like, dopamine, more, please. You want more and more.
Okay, I'm with you. I love chocolate. But how does liking chocolate turn into, like, a full-blown addiction to something?
Well, it's about how our brains learn. They did this research with cats a while back, and it turns out if a cat does something that gets a reward, they're more likely to do it again. It's the same for us. We get hooked on things that make us feel good.
So whether it's chocolate or, getting tons of likes on that last post, it's our brain going, yes, do that again.
You got it. And the more we do it, the stronger those connections in our brains become. It's like, imagine walking through the woods on the same path over and over. You end up with a clear trail.
So our brain's making trails for habits.
Pretty much. But here's the thing. This whole reward system, it's not just about what we like personally. It also shapes how we see the world, our beliefs, all that.
Like how societal norms can really stick with us.
Yeah, exactly. Think about how different things were even a few decades ago. Like what people thought was normal for women back in the 1930s is totally different now.
And that leads us right to technology, right? I mean, smartphones are basically designed to give us those dopamine hits over and over.
Totally. They've got it all figured out. Notifications, endless feeds. Our brains love novelty, so we keep checking.
It's like carrying a slot machine in our pocket.
And it can be just as addictive. There's even research showing that folks who spend more time online, even if it's to be social, sometimes end up feeling worse, like more isolated and lonely.
It's like we're chasing this happiness high, but it's not really leading to happiness.
Right. So is all this dopamine, this chasing after rewards, is that actually what happiness is all about?
That's a big question. And I know Judson Brewer, in his book, he brings in some Buddhist ideas to try to answer that.
Yeah, Buddhism has a lot to say about this. They talk about excitement, like that dopamine rush, and how it's different from a calmer, deeper kind of joy.
So wanting more and more isn't the key to feeling truly content.
Not necessarily. And mindfulness is about seeing this in ourselves. Like when we do get caught up in those loops, how does it actually feel?
You know, it's funny. When I first tried meditating, my mind was racing so much. I thought I was doing it wrong, but my teacher just smiled and said something about burning off the fetters.
That's a great way to put it. It's like we're chained to those thoughts and cravings.
But sometimes it's not just external things we're attached to. What about when we get addicted to a certain image of ourselves?
Oh, that's a good one. It's like we get hooked on being smart or successful based on what others think.
I have a story about this. Okay, so this is a little embarrassing, but back when Lance Armstrong was huge.
Oh, the cyclist.
Yeah, him, I was like obsessed. He was my hero. But then all that stuff came out about him doping.
Oh, yeah, that was a big deal.
Right, and I remember just trying so hard to explain it all away, to make it fit with my idea of him. It's like I was so attached to that image that I couldn't even consider he might have cheated.
You were trying to keep your worldview from crumbling. We all do that sometimes.
Totally. And then when he finally admitted it, that whole Lance addiction I had, it just shattered. It made me realize how easily our minds can cling to things, even when it's not doing us any good.
And it's the same with our self-image, right? We get so hooked on getting those A's or the praise, and our brain goes, dopamine, more of that.
So it's like we can get addicted to anything, really. Substances, people, even ideas about who we are.
Exactly. And that brings us to a whole other side of this, personality disorders.
Whoa, okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, think of it this way. Personality disorders are like reward-based learning gone wrong. in a big way. Like narcissistic personality disorder, some folks see that as a learned behavior. It's like people needing constant praise, always promoting themselves. It's because they're so used to seeking approval from outside.
I knew someone like that. Every conversation was all about his achievements.
It's like they need that constant validation to feel okay. Now, borderline personality disorder, that's different. Often it's people acting in chaotic ways because they're desperately searching for love, for that feeling of being seen and cared for. It often comes from childhood, if they didn't get that consistent, reliable love.
So their brains are always trying to figure out, how do I get that need met?
Exactly. And it shows just how powerful mindfulness can be. When we become more aware of our thoughts, our feelings, everything, we can start to untie ourselves from those unhealthy patterns.
Instead of always seeking validation from the outside.
Right. It's about realizing that true happiness doesn't come from getting those dopamine hits, those pats on the back. Speaking of which, how often do you find yourself checking your phone?
Oh, man. I don't even want to count. It's like a reflex at this point.
We're all in the same boat. But it's not just a harmless little thing. You know, they've done research linking all this smartphone use to a rise in childhood injuries. Yeah, parents are so distracted that they're not paying enough attention. It's kind of scary how powerful that pull is.
That's wild. So how do we resist that? It goes back to our brains, right?
Exactly. We get that rush from things that are unpredictable. Like, will this notification be something exciting? And those social media feeds, they just keep us scrolling. Always something new. It's like they've figured out how to hack our brains.
They totally have. But all that distraction can't be good, right? It pulls us out of the moment we're actually in.
And they've even found that if we spend a lot of time daydreaming about the future, we actually end up less happy with what's happening right now.
Oh, I definitely get that. Lost in the fantasy, then disappointed by reality.
Exactly. And that's where mindfulness comes in. It helps us catch those moments of distraction and make a choice.
Instead of reaching for the phone the second we're bored.
Yep. We can choose to just be present instead. But there's this other idea, ego depletion, which is basically our willpower is limited.
It's like a muscle that gets tired.
Exactly. The more we fight temptation, the harder it gets.
So with this craving mind, all this distraction, how do we tame it all? How do we break those habits that feel so deeply ingrained?
That's the big question, isn't it? And that's what we're going to get into next time. In part 2 of our deep dive, we'll be exploring mindfulness as a way to tame that thinking mind. So stay tuned. So ready to tackle that thinking mind.
Definitely. I think we've all been there, right? The thoughts just spiral out of control. It's like my mind's a hamster wheel.
And it can be exhausting. You try to stop, but it just spins faster.
Oh, yeah. I used to think I was like addicted to thinking. When I first tried meditating, it was so hard to quiet my mind, like a bad habit I couldn't break.
It's interesting you say that. Thinking itself isn't bad, obviously. We need our minds. But it's when we get stuck in certain patterns, especially the negative ones.
That's when it becomes a problem.
Right. So it's not about stopping thoughts altogether. It's about noticing them, seeing them without getting swept away.
And that's where mindfulness comes in.
Exactly. Mindfulness helps us observe those thoughts without judging them, just letting them come and go.
Easier said than done, though, right? Our minds can be pretty sticky, especially when it comes to negativity. What about rumination? That's a big one.
Rumination, yeah, it's a habit that keeps us stuck in those negative loops. And studies show that people who ruminate a lot, they tend to experience more anxiety and depression.
There was this one study I read about. They showed people different pictures: happy, sad, neutral. And the folks who were depressed, they were more likely to choose to look at the sad pictures again.
It's like they were drawn to the negativity. Their brains had learned to find some kind of reward in it.
Wow. So how do we shift out of that?
Well, mindfulness can help. And to understand how, we need to talk about the default mode network.
The default mode network. I've heard the term, but...
It sounds complicated, right?
Yeah.
Basically, think of it as your brain's daydreaming mode. It's active when we're not focused on a specific task, like when our minds wander or we're replaying memories, and it goes into overdrive during rumination.
So that's the part that gets us stuck in those craving loops.
Exactly. And mindfulness helps us become aware of this network, of what it's doing.
But how do you become aware of something you can't see or feel?
Well, with neuroimaging, like fMRI, we can actually observe brain activity. And they've done studies showing that mindfulness practices can actually reduce activity in the default mode network.
So you can actually see mindfulness working in the brain.
It's pretty amazing. I got to be part of some research on this using fMRI and neurofeedback. We were looking at how mindfulness affects the posterior cingulate cortex, or PCC. That's a key part of the default mode network.
Okay, and what did you find?
We found that experienced meditators, they could actually lower the activity in their PCC, even when their minds were wandering. They could watch those thoughts without getting caught up in them.
Wow.
And even more cool, the people who were new to meditation, they were able to learn this too, using real-time neurofeedback.
So they could see what their brain was doing and learn to calm that area down.
It was like watching them train their minds. And it has huge implications for breaking free from those craving-driven thought patterns.
So it's not about stopping thoughts, it's about changing how we relate to them.
You got it. It's about learning to observe without judgment, just letting those thoughts come and go. We create space.
Space between us and our thoughts.
Yeah. And in that space, we have the freedom to choose how we respond instead of just reacting automatically. So we don't get lost in the rumination, the what-ifs.
We can just watch them with curiosity.
Exactly. And that brings us to something pretty powerful, love in the craving mind.
Ooh, this is where it gets really interesting. Okay, so remember that crazy college romance I told you about? With the epic proposal?
Of course.
It was so intense, like we were addicted to each other.
Sounds like classic early stage romantic love. Helen Fisher, she's done amazing work on this.
Didn't she call romantic love the most addictive substance on Earth? Something like that.
She did. And her research actually shows that it activates the same brain regions as addiction. That explains the intensity, the obsession.
So falling in love is like getting hooked on a drug.
In a way, yeah. But of course, love is more than just that initial rush.
Right.
What about lasting love?
That's what I'm curious about. Is it even possible to love without getting addicted?
That's the million-dollar question. And it brings us back to something we talked about earlier, the posterior cingulate cortex.
The part that gets quiet when we meditate?
That's the one. Well, turns out it's also involved in romantic love. Studies have shown that it's more active in people who are in those early stages of love.
So the more infatuated they were, the more activity in the PCC.
Exactly. Which suggests that it might be playing a role in the more self-focused aspects of love.
Yeah.
All that me and mine thinking.
So if we're too focused on ourselves, on what we're getting, that actually fuels the craving.
And that craving can lead to all sorts of behaviors, constantly needing reassurance, getting jealous. It's like we're trying to get our love fix.
It's like an addict. But how do we break that cycle? How do we love without becoming addicted?
Remember we talked about loving kindness meditation, cultivating warmth and compassion, but without the clinging.
Yeah. It sounded so powerful.
Well, they've done research showing that it can actually deactivate the reward pathway in the brain.
So we can train our minds to experience love without getting caught up in all that craving.
Exactly. We can experience it in a more expansive, selfless way, connecting from a place of genuine care, not needing the other person to fill some void in us.
It's like shifting from me to we.
Right. And that can make a world of difference. We can experience love more fully without all the suffering that comes with attachment.
It's not just about romantic love, though, right? This applies to all our relationships.
Totally. Friends, family, cultivating that loving kindness, it just makes everything better.
It reminds me of flow. You know, that feeling when you're totally absorbed in something. I get it when I'm mountain biking. Everything just clicks. There's this joy.
That's flow. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, he's the guy who coined the term. He described it as this optimal experience where you're super focused and action and awareness just merge.
And time gets all weird, right? Hours can feel like minutes.
Exactly. But flow isn't always easy to achieve. It takes a clear goal, a challenge that's right for your skill level, and feedback so you know how you're doing.
So it's not just about doing something mindlessly. It's about, like, having a sense of progress.
And that feeling of mastery is rewarding in itself, like when you nail that tricky trail. But did you know there's a connection between flow and mindfulness?
Really? I had no idea.
Csikszentmihalyi actually talked about meditation as a way to train for flow. Mindfulness helps us cultivate those same qualities that support flow, being present, focused, non-judgmental.
So by quieting the mind, we create the conditions for flow to happen more easily.
That's the idea. And remember the PCC, how it's involved in all that self-referential thinking? Well, studies show that its activity actually decreases during flow states.
So we're getting out of our own way, letting ourselves fully experience the moment.
Exactly. And that's what makes flow so enjoyable. We're not thinking about ourselves, we're just being. And flow isn't just for extreme athletes, by the way.
Right. It can happen with anything, really. Playing music, having a deep conversation.
As long as we bring the right attitude. Csikszentmihalyi said that flow is more about being than doing. It's about being fully involved in life.
So it's about finding flow in those everyday moments, not just the big adventure.
Exactly. And mindfulness helps us do that. It helps us appreciate the simple things, find joy, even when things are tough. Which brings us to resilience.
Ah, resilience. Life throws us curveballs, so it's essential to be able to bounce back.
Speaking of bouncing back, have you heard the parable of the two monks and the woman?
I love that story. Tell it.
Okay, so there are these two monks, an older one and a younger one. They come to a river, and the current's really strong. There's a woman who needs help getting across. Now, these monks have taken a vow not to touch women. So the younger monk is shocked when the older monk just picks her up and carries her across.
And then he's fuming about it,
Yeah,
right?
for hours. He finally confronts the older monk, like, how could you break your vow? And the older monk just calmly says, I set her down on the other side of the river. Why are you still carrying her?
It's such a great illustration of how holding on to things just causes us suffering.
The younger monk was so attached to the idea of the broken vow that he couldn't let it go.
And the older monk, he knew the act of carrying was over. No need to hold on to the anger.
It's a lesson in letting go, and that's a key part of resilience.
It's about adapting, letting go of what we can't control, and mindfulness helps with that.
Absolutely. It allows us to observe those thoughts and feelings without getting swept away. We can see them for what they are, just thoughts, just feelings, and they'll pass.
We don't have to get caught up in the drama.
We can create space and choose how we respond. And that's where resilience comes from. But it's not just about letting go. It's also about compassion.
We talked about empathy fatigue earlier, how caregivers can get burned out. But there's a different kind of compassion, right? One that doesn't deplete us.
Exactly. It's about having a genuine desire to help without getting lost in the suffering. And mindfulness helps us with that too.
We can be present with suffering without getting overwhelmed by it.
We're not trying to fix it, just being with it. And that can be incredibly healing. I had this experience on a meditation retreat once. I was so angry, it felt like a fire inside me. I tried everything to put it out, but nothing worked.
What did you do?
I surrendered. I stopped fighting and just let myself feel the anger. And it started to fade like the fire had run out of fuel.
Wow. It shows how resistance just makes things worse.
The more we fight, the stronger it gets. But when we let go, there's space for healing. And that's what resilience is all about. Learning to bend without breaking. And mindfulness gives us the tools.
It's about awareness, compassion, and letting go. All essential for navigating life.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Which brings us to the core of it all. We don't have to be victims of our craving minds.
By understanding how our minds work and practicing mindfulness, we can choose a different path.
And that's a powerful message of hope. But there's even more to uncover. Let's continue this in the final part of our deep dive.
Wow, we've covered so much in this deep dive. I mean, we started with how our craving minds get us hooked on everything. Smartphones, self-image, even love.
And we've seen how mindfulness can help us with all that. Taming those cravings, building up our resilience, finding peace in this moment.
But it's one thing to just know all this stuff, right? We have to actually do something with it.
You got it. Judson Brewer talks about this a lot.
Yeah.
We need to see clearly what's happening, the results of what we do.
So being aware of the rewards we're getting, both the good and the bad, from our habits, then we can choose what to do.
Remember those smokers in his study? They learned to just observe the cravings without judging them. And they started to see that smoking wasn't really giving them what they thought.
It's like waking up from a dream you didn't even know you were having.
Mindfulness is that wake-up call. But it's not a one-time thing.
It's got to be a practice. We build the muscle day after day.
That's it. Approaching everything with curiosity, compassion, noticing what's happening, but not getting swept away.
And that awareness gives us the space to choose something different, something that maybe leads to a better life.
It sounds simple, but it's not always easy. Those craving minds, they're strong, always trying to pull us back.
Like trying to make a new path through a jungle. It's hard work. Sometimes you get lost.
Which is why it helps to have support. Being around other people who are doing this work, it makes a big difference.
I've heard that, like joining a group or finding a teacher.
Totally. You don't have to do it alone. We're all in this together, right?
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the craving mind, what's one thing you really hope people take away from this?
That you have more power than you think. You don't have to be controlled by your cravings. When you understand your mind, when you cultivate mindfulness, you can choose a different path.
What's one question you want to leave our listeners with today?
What habit would you like to break free from? What's the craving that's holding you back?
Notice how it feels the next time you get hooked. in your body, in your mind.
You might surprise yourself.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious.
And may you find freedom from your craving mind.